An 80,000-seat stadium fell into deathly silence because Michael Jackson saw something that brought tears to his eyes. The king of pop stopped mid-verse during "Heal the World," his signature fedora tilting as he peered into the crowd. His gloved hand rose to cover his mouth in shock. Something in row 45, section C had captured the attention of the most famous entertainer on earth. But how did we get to this moment? Let me take you back to that unforgettable night in 1993. The Dangerous World Tour had been breaking records across America. City after city, Michael Jackson was delivering performances that redefined what a concert could be. But Dallas, Texas would be different. This wasn't just another stop on the tour. This was the night that would change Michael Jackson forever. Backstage at the Cotton Bowl, Michael was going through his usual pre-show ritual. The meticulous preparation, the vocal warm-ups, the final adjustments to his iconic military-style jacket. His team buzzing around him, ensuring every detail was perfect. But tonight something felt different in the air. 5 minutes, Michael! His stage manager called out. As 80,000 fans roared outside, their voices creating a wall of sound that penetrated even the soundproofed walls backstage, Michael closed his eyes and centered himself. He had no idea that in the audience, in row 45, section C, sat a man whose story would intersect with his in the most unexpected way. Vietnam War veteran James Mitchell had never been to a concert in his life. At 68 years old, battling PTSD and survivor's guilt that had haunted him for decades, he was there because his granddaughter Sarah had insisted. "Grandpa, you need to get out. You need to live again." The old soldier had lost 3 of his closest friends in the jungles of Southeast Asia, and every day since 1971 had been a struggle just to find meaning. James clutched his granddaughter's hand as the lights dimmed. He wore his old military jacket, the one with faded medals pinned to the chest, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Vietnam Service Medal. These weren't decorations to him. They were reminders of the boys who never made it home. The show began with explosive pyrotechnics. Michael emerged from beneath the stage like a force of nature, moving with that otherworldly grace that had made him a legend. Jam! Thundered through the stadium. Billie Jean sent the crowd into hysteria. For 2 hours, Michael commanded that stage like a general commanding an army. But then came "Heal the World." Michael Jackson stopped singing mid-sentence. The arena fell into a silence so profound you could hear hearts beating. As the gentle melody of his most personal song began, Michael's eyes swept across the sea of faces. It was something he did at every concert, connecting with his audience, making eye contact, sharing that magical moment. But tonight, his gaze landed on something that stopped him cold. There, in row 45, section C, sat James Mitchell. The old veteran's weathered face was streaked with tears. Not tears of joy like the screaming fans around him. These were different. Deeper. These were tears of recognition, of pain finally being acknowledged. Michael's voice cracked. He stopped singing entirely. The 80,000-person crowd fell silent, confused. The backing track continued, but their king of pop had gone completely still on stage. His backup dancers exchanged worried glances. His band kept playing, waiting for his cue. But Michael Jackson was transfixed by what he saw. James Mitchell was crying because for the first time in 22 years, someone was singing about healing the world, and he realized he had spent 2 decades believing the world couldn't be healed. That he couldn't be healed. That the ghosts of Vietnam would follow him forever. Subscribe and comment now. What happened next will leave you breathless. Michael Jackson did something he had never done in his entire career. He stopped the show. "Hold the music," he said into his microphone, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow reaching every corner of the massive stadium. The band stopped. The backing track went silent. 80,000 people held their breath. Michael walked to the edge of the stage, never taking his eyes off James Mitchell. Even from hundreds of feet away, the connection was palpable. The cameras, the lights, the screaming fans, none of it mattered in that moment. "Sir," Michael said, his voice now stronger, carrying across the stadium with crystal clarity. Sir, in the military jacket. Would you stand up? James Mitchell's granddaughter squeezed his hand. Grandpa, he's talking to you. With trembling legs, James slowly stood. The stadium lights found him, a spotlight illuminating his frail form and his metal-decorated jacket. The crowd around him began to realize what was happening, and a respectful quiet settled over the entire venue. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, removed his fedora, something he rarely did during performances. He placed his hand over his heart in a gesture of respect. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael's voice echoed through the stadium. We have a hero with us tonight. The crowd erupted, but Michael held up his hand for silence. But backstage, Michael Jackson was making a decision that would shock his entire team. Without warning, Michael walked off the stage. His security team panicked. His manager started shouting into his headset. 80,000 people watched in stunned silence as the king of pop disappeared into the wings. But Michael Jackson wasn't running away. He was running towards something. Within minutes, he appeared at the bottom of Section C, surrounded by security but moving with purpose. The crowd parted as he made his way up the stairs, row by row, until he reached James Mitchell. The old veteran couldn't believe what he was seeing. Michael Jackson, the most famous person on the planet, was standing in front of him with tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for your service," Michael said, his voice breaking with emotion. "And I'm sorry for what you've been carrying all these years." James Mitchell broke down completely. "I lost my friends," he whispered, so quietly only Michael could hear. "I lost my buddies, and I never understood why I made it home when they didn't." Without hesitation, Michael Jackson began to remove his iconic military-style jacket, the one he'd worn in the Thriller video, the one that had become part of his legend. He placed it around James Mitchell's shoulders. "They made it home," Michael said, looking directly into the old soldier's eyes. "They made it home through you. You carry their memory, their spirit. That's why you're here. That's why we met tonight." The entire stadium was watching this exchange on the big screens, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. But Michael wasn't finished. He took James Mitchell's weathered hand and began walking him toward the stage. "Will you help me sing?" he asked. Together they walked through the crowd, down the aisles, and up onto the stage of the Cotton Bowl. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, and James Mitchell, a forgotten hero, stood side by side under the brightest lights in the world. Michael handed James his microphone. "Tell them your friends' names," he said softly. With a voice that shook but grew stronger with each word, James Mitchell spoke into that microphone. "Tommy Rodriguez. Danny O'Sullivan. Marcus Washington. They were 19, 20, and 21. They didn't make it home from Vietnam. But they're here tonight." The stadium erupted in applause, but Michael raised his hand for quiet one more time. Share this video and subscribe, because what happened next created a moment that would define Michael Jackson's legacy forever. Michael Jackson began to sing, "Heal the World," again, but this time it was different. This time it wasn't a performance, it was a prayer. And standing next to him, still wearing Michael's jacket, James Mitchell found his voice joining in. "Heal the world, make it a better place, for you and for me and the entire human race." 80,000 voices joined them. The sound was unlike anything ever heard at a concert before. It wasn't just singing, it was collective healing. It was 80,000 people recognizing that the man on stage wasn't just a veteran, he was their neighbor, their father, their grandfather who had carried pain for too long. When the song ended, Michael Jackson hugged James Mitchell like he was hugging his own father. He whispered something in the old man's ear that only James could hear. "Your friends are proud of you. And so am I." Michael never asked for his jacket back. It stayed with James Mitchell for the rest of his life. But the story doesn't end there. After that night, James Mitchell became a different man. He started volunteering at the VA hospital, sharing his story with other veterans who were struggling with survivor's guilt and PTSD. He would tell them about the night Michael Jackson stopped a concert for him, and how it taught him that healing wasn't just possible, it was necessary. But there's more to this story that will absolutely blow your mind. 3 weeks after that Dallas concert, Michael Jackson received an unexpected phone call. It was James Mitchell, calling from his granddaughter's house. His voice was different, stronger, clearer than it had been in decades. "Mr. Jackson," James said, "I need to tell you something. That night changed everything for me, but there's something you don't know." Michael listened as James revealed the rest of his story. The 3 friends he had lost in Vietnam, Tommy, Danny, and Marcus, they had died saving a village of children from enemy fire. James had carried survivor's guilt not just because he lived, but because he never knew if their sacrifice meant anything. "After your concert," James continued, his voice breaking with emotion, "I went to the Vietnam Memorial. I touched their names on that wall, and for the first time in 22 years, I told them about the village we saved. I told them their sacrifice mattered." Michael Jackson, sitting in his Neverland Ranch, began to cry. What James told Michael next would inspire one of the most powerful songs never released. James had tracked down the village they had saved in 1971. Through a veterans organization, he discovered that the 47 children they rescued had grown up, had families of their own. Those 3 young soldiers had saved not just 47 lives, but hundreds of future lives, children and grandchildren who existed because of their sacrifice. "Tommy, Danny, and Marcus didn't just die for nothing," James told Michael. "They died for everything. They died for a future they'd never see but helped create." Michael Jackson was so moved by this revelation that he immediately drove to his home studio. That same night, he began writing a song called "The Names on the Wall." It was meant to be a tribute to all the forgotten heroes, all the James Mitchells of the world who carried pain they were never meant to carry alone. The song was never officially released, but bootleg recordings reveal lyrics that would have been among Michael's most powerful. "They're not gone, they're not lost, they're alive in every life they saved." But Michael's connection with James didn't end there. Michael secretly funded James's trips to visit the families of other Vietnam veterans. He paid for translation services, for flights, for hotel rooms, all so that other survivors could find the same peace James had discovered. James became an unofficial ambassador of healing, traveling across the country to share his story with other veterans' families. In 1995, 2 years after that Dallas concert, Michael Jackson did something unprecedented. He organized a private concert at his Neverland Ranch exclusively for Vietnam veterans and their families. No media, no cameras, no publicity, just Michael Jackson performing for 200 of America's forgotten heroes. James Mitchell was there, still wearing Michael's jacket. But this time, he wasn't in the audience. Michael brought him on stage for every song, introducing him as "my friend, my teacher, my brother." During that private concert, something magical happened. When Michael performed "Heal the World," all 200 veterans and their families joined hands. Many of them were meeting for the first time, but James Mitchell's story had given them all permission to heal. One veteran's wife later wrote, "I watched my husband cry for the first time in 30 years. Not tears of pain, but tears of release." Michael Jackson didn't just heal James Mitchell that night in Dallas, he started a ripple effect that healed all of us. But the story gets even more incredible. In 1997, Michael Jackson was invited to perform at a concert for Princess Diana's landmine charity. When he accepted, he made an unusual request. He wanted to bring a special guest. That guest was James Mitchell. At Wembley Stadium, in front of 72,000 people and a global television audience of 1.5 billion, Michael Jackson introduced James Mitchell as a man who taught me that healing the world isn't just a song, it's a sacred duty. James, now 72 years old but standing tall in Michael's jacket, spoke to that massive audience about the importance of clearing landmines, weapons that continued to hurt innocent people long after wars ended, just like the emotional landmines that veterans carry long after they return home. The comparison was powerful, and it helped raise over $60 million for landmine removal that night. Michael Jackson never spoke publicly about that night, but those close to him said it changed him too. He began incorporating moments in his concerts where he would acknowledge veterans, first responders, and ordinary heroes in his audiences. That night in Dallas became the template for dozens of similar moments throughout the rest of his career. James Mitchell kept Michael's jacket until he passed away in 2018, 25 years after that magical night. But before he died, he did something that would have made Michael incredibly proud. He established the Three Names Foundation, dedicated to helping veterans find closure by connecting them with the communities and families their service had impacted. The foundation's motto, inscribed on every plaque and certificate, reads, "They made it home through you." In his will, James left Michael's jacket to his granddaughter Sarah, along with a letter that read, "The King of Pop taught me that healing the world starts with healing each other, one person at a time. Now it's your turn to pass on the healing." Sarah donated the jacket to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but she kept something else, the original handwritten lyrics to "The Names on the Wall," which Michael had given to her grandfather during one of their many phone conversations over the years. Today, the jacket sits in the Hall of Fame with a plaque that tells the story of the night Michael Jackson saw a veteran in the audience and stopped the world to say thank you. But next to it sits a second display, James Mitchell's Bronze Star and Purple Heart, donated by Sarah with a note that reads, "These belong to a man who learned that the greatest honor isn't in the medals you earn, but in the healing you share." The jacket isn't just a piece of clothing. It's a symbol of the moment when entertainment became ministry, when fame became service, and when the King of Pop reminded us all that the greatest performances aren't on stage. They happen when we see each other's humanity and choose to heal instead of hurt. Michael Jackson's music will live forever, but that night in Dallas proved something even more important. His heart was as legendary as his voice. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a superstar can do is stop being a star and start being human.